What do you do when you feel publicly shamed? Today's video is a little bit more for me than for anything else, so please just bear with me. Hello to the internet, my name's Craig Montgomery and we're here today to talk about the things that make you say, who even am I? And today we're going to be talking about problematic language and a little bit about the call-out culture, so to say, of, calling out when people are using problematic language. And the reason this video is a little bit more for me than anything else is because recently I used some problematic language in a YouTube comment and I was subsequently and rightfully called out for using it. So I have some thoughts. As a brief summary, I was watching a video on the How to Make Everything channel, which is super cool. You should totally go check it out. In it, the host Andy was making some lipstick and he was kind of just making a mess of everything, and it was pretty cringy to watch. And I commented on the video, this might be paraphrasing, I didn't write it down specifically, but it was like that feeling when you realize how OCD you are by watching someone else be messy. But the comment caught the eye of a few people who wanted to let me know that I was using the term OCD incorrectly, and then a few people who wanted to sort of aggressively let me know that I was wrong. When this happened, I went through what typically happens to us when we feel publicly shamed, and that is to get defensive, which means I also sort of felt like they were being offensive, even if they weren't. So it kind of changed the way that I was interpreting their responses initially. So when I first read the responses, I thought that they were just being kind of overly sensitive because I was like, it was just a joke. Additionally, I made the further mistake of feeling like I am sensitive to the topic, that I do have an interest in mental health, and I am aware of the severity of dealing with OCD, the different levels it can happen at, but it can be a pretty debilitating mental disorder, and it's not something to make light of. But I went at it from the angle that I wasn't making light of it offensively. I was using humor to connect with that type of mental experience, and that it was, just a joke and funny. So I felt like it was harmless initially, and I read the responses as if they were just assuming that I was unaware and uneducated, and which turns out I kind of was ignorant and uneducated. The big mistake here is that the implication of saying something like, I realize how OCD I am when I watch this person being messy, it has a giant implication that being OCD is something you can kind of switch on and off, that it is just an experience that you can have sometimes, which is leaning heavily into the privilege of someone who is neurotypical, which at this point in my life I am. And being that we're in a culture that doesn't really respect the heaviness of what it is to deal with a mental illness and to treat that aspect of life with the respect and dignity that it deserves, any language that's sort of feeding into that mindset is extremely damaging and toxic, and can be extremely hurtful to anyone who is affected by whatever topic you're speaking towards without the respect and dignity it deserves. The language we use to speak about topics is directly linked to the way that we think about them. I'm of the mind that we construct our worldviews and thought frameworks around topics with the words that we use. And so if we're using words frivolously, then we endanger the frameworks of how we think about these things. So it is extremely important that we are intentional about the way we formulate words when we're talking about them. Like this, being real good with all those words. So I always want to strive to be using the most effective language to speak about topics respectfully. And if the price is a cheap joke, then I will happily pay that 1,000 times to be the most unfunny person on the world. On the world? In the world? In the world. I mean, I'm not really funny anyway, so. So after I was a little weak and kind of had a back and forth in the comments on that comment, for a minute. I had to step away and ruminate about it because it wasn't sitting right with me about why I wasn't seeing eye to eye with the people who were calling me out. And I stumbled across another video from a YouTuber speaking about problematic language in general, and she mentioned actually the OCD topic, and it kind of clicked for me about why what I said was inappropriate, and kind of the specifics behind what those implications were and why I was implying something that was not what I thought I was doing. So I went back, I edited my post on the video, and I apologized for using the term incorrectly. And now I'm here verbally apologizing for it again because I do think it was very irresponsible for me to speak ignorantly and then sort of to kind of stick up for myself, and to, instead of listening to people who were telling me that I was wrong. So I'm sorry. That was inappropriate, and I feel badly about it, especially because I always want to be an advocate for people who are suffering. It's a huge part of what I do in the work on this channel, is trying to work for understanding and for us all to listen better. And this was it was a good wake-up call for me to keep diligent on myself and the fact that I'm still learning and I'm still growing. So, and then I did want to talk a little bit about call-out culture, so to say. And what I mean by that is the act of calling someone out when they are doing something inappropriate or using problematic language. Because in my experience, the action of doing the calling out comes out in sort of two flavors. The first being just a simple, "that's not how you say that," which is fine, it's letting the person know, but it may not really do the job of helping them understand why. My initial response to the just kind of blank statement of "that's not how you use that term" was that person was interpreting it differently than the way that I meant it, which again is on me. It's our responsibility to be educated and respectful human beings. I totally understand that, and I take responsibility for what I said and, what I say in general. But as a person calling out, if we are hoping to incite some change in the person who said something problematic, it's a little bit better to give them some guidance in why. The second flavor of call out that I typically see is sort of the first statement where it's saying "this is wrong," but it has another layer of "and you're a bad person for saying it." So what's happening here is shame is being put onto the person using problematic language to make them feel badly for what they said. Whether that's intentional or not, that is what's happening. That's what that language does. It places shame onto the other person, which just completely separates the two parties. It says that you're a bad person and you're over here, I'm over here on the right side. And it typically has the implication as well of there's no hope of bridging this gap. It can actually be so heated that I've seen people on the internet say I completely lost all respect for this person for doing that thing, which is extremely dramatic as a response to it, and doesn't give any kindness or patience towards another human being to grow or learn or understand that maybe what they're saying isn't what they think they're saying, which is not exactly fair. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We all say problematic things from time to time. A lot of these things are kind of in common vernacular, even if they maybe shouldn't be, but they just have been for so long. It can actually take a while to break the habit of using them. In this instance, I don't feel like I'm in a place in my life where I would ever intentionally speak about a mental illness in a way that I would hope would disrespect the struggle of dealing with that mental illness or put harm on people who are suffering from it, because I am very sensitive and caring towards that type of suffering due to my own history and the people in my life. But I still used language that was doing that because it was part of my common vernacular from my past. I've had friends who used that type of statement before, and so I needed that moment to learn and to change my observation of that terminology and how to use it. So I think that giving the kindness and patience in that type of situation for me to say, oh, I was wrong, and to learn and grow and change and to try and stop doing it moving forward, I think recognizing that is important rather than if you were on the other side of it, then to look at me and say like, oh, he's a terrible person, I'm never speaking to him again. Like, I mean, sure, I guess like do that if that's what you want, but that doesn't unite us. That doesn't bring more people to being more respectful to other people. It just starts segmenting groups into, I don't know, the people who can last the longest without saying something offensive, which good luck with that, because you're just gonna stop talking? You might need to. Just never say anything ever again, ever. Because that's dangerous. So that's a little rambly, but I really wanted to highlight something that I think is super important, that I feel there is a very large difference between intentionally saying something that is going to cause harm towards someone else, and then saying something in ignorance that can cause harm to someone else. And conflating those two actions into the same just because the outcome is the same, I think is very unfair. It's super important to recognize the possible harm or the harm that was caused by what was said, but in terms of addressing the person saying something offensively, I think it would serve all of us better to lend a little bit more kindness and patience towards that person and give them the chance to grow and lend them your knowledge if you're better informed on the topic than they are, and hopefully they can listen to. Honestly, that's on them to move past the embarrassment and all of the self-defense mechanisms we go through when we feel like we're at risk, which is what happens when we mess up. But if we're giving them the pieces of knowledge that we have, then hopefully they can listen to that. And I guess, not to harp on the situation too much, but I feel like if it had been explained to me what I was implying, instead of just saying that I was using the term OCD incorrectly, if it had been explained, like, you're implying that someone can sometimes experience OCD when that's not how a mental disorder works, then I feel like I would have had a little bit more of a quick transition to understanding what I was saying and like why it was problematic. Then again, I guess there could also be the argument that we usually learn best when we learn firsthand, and hopefully this is a lesson that I will remember permanently and be able to transition into other parts of my life, because it's something that I had to go through and I had to find on my own. I guess mainly I'm really saying a lot of this because I just have a hard time taking seriously somebody who writes off other people because they say something in ignorance. I personally just have a problem with the response of like, how dare you say that, you are a bad person. I don't know, I guess that might just sound like I'm a little butthurt about getting called out. And I'm not. I'm very glad that I was told that I was, saying something inappropriate so that I could adjust it, so that other people wouldn't see the comment, and also for myself to learn about it. So I'm definitely not upset that it happened, or that, that I was called out, and mostly just don't like the shaming, so I'm trying to think about that. But I guess I can turn it to you. What do you think about the situation, and about language and behavior being called out in general, and how that is addressed from the person calling someone out? I'm really curious if you have a better concept of how that can happen respectfully. Maybe is it more of a, hey, I don't think that you understand what you're saying. If you are interested in learning, you can reach out to me sort of direction, so that not every situation is just a big school lesson, because that could also probably come across a little aggressive if you're just like, you're not using that correctly, this is the correct usage of the term. I'm not sure. I'm really curious. So if you have any ideas or, directions you can point me in a place where I can start to do some reading about this or something, that would be great. But yeah, and mostly I'm interested in what your opinions on this are. And also, what are the things that you've spoken about that you've been called out on, so that I think that would also help us have a better awareness of situations, because there might be things that I'm not quite yet aware that I'm still using incorrectly. So let's share and learn together, because that's the only way we can be more respectful to each other, I guess. I don't know. I hope that makes sense and it was interesting to you, maybe helpful in some kind of sense. And again, I am very sorry for using the term OCD incorrectly and anyone that I possibly may have offended. I certainly was not intending that at all, and I will do better moving forward. While you're here, you can subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I release videos every Tuesday and they come to you that way, which is cool. And as always, take care of yourself.